You can't even imagine what it's like to sit across from the woman you once promised forever, watching her laugh as she signs your divorce papers. I never thought I'd see the day. But there she was, my wife of 23 years, smirking, her pen gliding across the page like she was signing for a delivery, not ending a marriage. If you think you know how this story ends, you're in for a shock. Because when the judge read out my net worth, the entire courtroom went silent. And what happened next? Well, let's just say nobody saw it coming. Before I tell you what the judge said, I want you to do something for me. If you've ever been blindsided by someone you trusted, or if you've ever had to watch someone walk away from everything you built together, hit that subscribe button, like this video, and share your story in the comments. You're not alone, and your voice matters here. Now let me take you back to that morning. The courthouse was colder than I expected, all marble floors and echoing footsteps. My soon-to-be ex-wife, Karen, arrived in a red dress, her hair done up like she was going to a party. She barely looked at me. Her lawyer, a slick guy in an expensive suit, kept whispering in her ear, making her laugh. I sat there, clutching a folder of documents, feeling like a ghost at my own funeral. We'd been married more than 2 decades. We built a life, raised 2 kids, survived layoffs, illnesses, even the loss of my parents. But somewhere along the way, we lost each other. Karen started spending more time with her friends, less time at home. She said I was boring, that I didn't dream big enough. I tried to fix things. Date nights, counseling, even a second honeymoon. But nothing worked. In the end, she said she wanted more. More excitement, more money, more life. And apparently less of me. The divorce was her idea. She wanted the house, half my retirement, and a chunk of my business. Her lawyer made it sound like I should be grateful she wasn't asking for more. I kept thinking about all the years I'd worked late, all the weekends I'd missed with the kids, all the times I'd put her first. None of it seemed to matter now. As we waited for the judge, Karen scrolled through her phone, barely glancing up. I caught her eye once, and she just smiled, a cold, triumphant smile. "Don't look so glum," she whispered. "You'll land on your feet, you always do." Then she laughed, loud enough for the bailiff to look over. I felt my face burn with shame and anger. You might be wondering what I did next. Did I beg her to reconsider? Did I lose my temper? Did I walk out? I'll tell you, but first let me ask you, have you ever been pushed to your breaking point by someone who thought they held all the cards? What did you do? Let me know in the comments. And if you haven't seen our last story about the man who lost everything at Thanksgiving, you should watch it after this video. Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones who need the biggest wake-up call. The judge finally entered, a stern woman with sharp eyes. She looked over the paperwork, then glanced at Karen and me. "Are both parties ready?" she asked. Karen's lawyer nodded, grinning. My lawyer, a quiet man named Bill, just gave a small nod. I tried to steady my breathing. The judge started reading through the settlement. Karen's lawyer kept interrupting, pushing for more, arguing over every detail. I sat there, listening to them talk about my life like it was a list of assets to be divided. The house, the cars, the business, the retirement accounts, even the dog. Karen didn't flinch. She just kept smiling, tapping her pen on the table, as if she was already spending the money. Then came the moment that changed everything. The judge turned to me and said, "Mr. Thompson, can you confirm your current net worth?" I handed over the documents I'd prepared, bank statements, business valuations, everything. She looked them over, her expression unreadable. Karen leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. She thought she was about to hit the jackpot. But as the judge read through the numbers, her smile started to fade. The courtroom grew quiet. Even her lawyer stopped smirking. You see, what Karen didn't know, what nobody knew, was that I'd made some decisions in the months leading up to the divorce. Decisions that would change the outcome in ways she never expected. You ever sit in a room and feel the air change, like everyone's holding their breath at the same time? That's what happened when the judge started reading my financial disclosures. Karen's laughter faded, replaced by a look I hadn't seen in years. Uncertainty. Her lawyer leaned in, scanning the numbers, his confidence slipping with every page the judge turned. The judge cleared her throat. According to these documents, Mr. Thompson's net worth is significantly less than what was initially presented. She looked at Karen's lawyer. Is this accurate? He stammered, flipping through his own files. Your Honor, we were under the impression. The judge cut him off. Impressions don't matter in my courtroom. Facts do. Karen's face went pale. She shot me a look, half confusion, half accusation. I met her eyes, calm for the first time in months. I'd spent sleepless nights preparing for this moment, making sure every dollar was accounted for, every asset protected. I wasn't hiding money. I was protecting what I'd built from being torn apart by someone who'd already left me in every way that mattered. You might be wondering how I did it. Did I move money offshore? Did I lie? No, I did something smarter. Months before the divorce, I'd sold my share of the business to my brother at fair market value and put the proceeds into a trust for our kids' education. I paid off the mortgage, cleared my debts, and made sure the only thing left in my name was the house and a modest retirement account. Everything else was either spent on the family or secured for the future of our children, something Karen had never bothered to plan for. The judge looked at Karen. Mrs. Thompson, based on these numbers, your settlement will be adjusted accordingly. Her lawyer tried to protest, but the judge was firm. You can't divide what isn't there, and you can't claim what's been legally and transparently allocated to your children. Karen's lips trembled. For the first time, she looked less like a woman celebrating her freedom and more like someone realizing she'd miscalculated. She turned to me, her voice low. You planned this, didn't you? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. If you've ever had to protect yourself from someone who thought they could take everything, you know how lonely it feels. But you also know the satisfaction of standing your ground. What would you have done in my place? Would you have fought back, or let them walk away with everything you worked for? Let me know in the comments. And if you haven't seen our story about the father who took back everything after being laughed at by his family, watch it next. Sometimes the best revenge is making sure you're the one who writes the ending. The judge finalized the settlement. Karen got the house, but not the business, not the retirement, not the windfall she'd been counting on. The trust for the kids was untouchable. My lawyer shook my hand, a small smile on his face. You did good, he whispered. You did right by your family. After court, Karen tried to corner me in the hallway. You think you're clever? She hissed. You think you won? I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the woman I'd loved, the woman I'd lost, and the stranger she'd become. I didn't win, Karen, I said quietly. I just stopped losing. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, the silence heavy but peaceful. I thought about Al, all the years I'd spent trying to make her happy, trying to be enough. I realized I'd been fighting the wrong battle. It wasn't about money. It was about respect, about boundaries, about finally choosing myself. If you want to know what happened after the dust settled, how my kids reacted, how I rebuilt my life, and what Karen did next, keep watching. Because the real story wasn't about the divorce, it was about what came after. You ever notice how, after a storm, the world feels strangely quiet? That's how it was for me in the weeks after the divorce. The papers were signed, the house was no longer mine, and Karen's laughter was just an echo in my memory. I moved into a small apartment on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. For the first time in years, I could hear myself think. But peace doesn't come easy after a war. My phone buzzed with messages from friends, some offering sympathy, others fishing for gossip. My kids, Emily and Jake, were caught in the middle. Emily was angry, at both of us, I think. Jake was quiet, trying to keep the peace. I tried to give them space, but every time I saw them, I could feel the weight of everything we'd lost. One evening, Emily showed up at my door, her eyes red from crying. She didn't say a word, just walked in and sat on the couch. I made us tea the way her mother used to, and waited. Finally she spoke. "Why did you let her take everything?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why didn't you fight harder?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the pain I'd tried so hard to shield her from. "I didn't let her take everything," I said quietly. "I protected what mattered. You and Jake, your future, the rest. It's just stuff." She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I hate her for what she did to you, for what she did to us." I pulled her close, holding her the way I did when she was little. "Don't hate her, AM. Hate only eats you up inside. We can't change what happened, but we can decide what we do next." Jake came by the next day, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. He didn't say much, just sat with me in silence, watching the game on TV. But before he left, he turned to me and said, "I'm proud of you, Dad. You didn't let her win." If you've ever had to rebuild your life from scratch, you know how hard it is to find hope in the ruins. But you also know how every small step forward feels like a victory. What would you do if you had to start over? Would you hold on to the past, or would you let it go? Let me know in the comments. And if you haven't seen our story about the man who found peace after losing everything, watch it next. Sometimes the best revenge is living well. Karen, meanwhile, was learning that money can't buy happiness. The house felt empty without the family she'd pushed away. Her friends stopped coming around when the parties ended. She called me once, late at night, her voice shaky. "Are you happy now?" she asked. I thought about it for a moment. "I'm getting there," I said. "Are you?" She hung up without answering. That night, I realized something important. I wasn't a victim. I wasn't a loser. I was a survivor. And for the first time in a long time, I was free. If you want to know how I rebuilt my life, how I found new purpose, new love, and a new sense of self, keep watching. Because the story doesn't end with a signature on a piece of paper. Sometimes that's just where it begins. You ever wake up and realize you're not the same person you were just a few months ago? That's how it felt as I settled into my new life. The apartment was small, but it was filled with sunlight in the mornings, and I started to find comfort in the quiet. I learned to cook for one, to fill my evenings with books and music instead of arguments and tension. For the first time in years, I could breathe. But healing isn't a straight line. There were days when the loneliness hit hard, when I missed the sound of laughter in the house, even if it wasn't always kind. There were nights when I wondered if I'd made the right choices, if I should have fought harder or given in more. But every time those doubts crept in, I remembered the look on Karen's face in that courtroom, the way she realized she couldn't take what I'd built for our kids. That memory kept me moving forward. One Saturday, Jake invited me to his soccer game. I sat in the bleachers cheering him on, feeling a pride I hadn't felt in a long time. After the game, he ran over, sweaty and grinning. "Thanks for coming, Dad," he said. "It means a lot." I realized then that I hadn't lost everything. I'd just lost what didn't matter. Emily started coming around more too. She'd bring over takeout, and we'd talk late into the night about school, about her dreams, about the future. She told me she wanted to study law to help people who felt powerless. "Like you did, Dad," she said. "You didn't let Mum walk all over you. You showed me how to stand up for myself." If you've ever had to rebuild your relationship with your kids after a divorce, you know how fragile those first steps can be. But you also know how every honest conversation, every shared laugh, is a small miracle. What would you say to your children if you had one more chance? Let me know in the comments. And if you haven't seen our story about the father who found hope after heartbreak, watch it next. Sometimes the best way to heal is to help someone else do the same. Meanwhile, Karen's world was shrinking. The house was too big, too quiet. She tried to fill it with new friends, new hobbies, but nothing stuck. She called Emily one night, asking if she wanted to come over for dinner. Emily said no. "I'm spending time with Dad," she told her. "Maybe another time. I won't pretend I didn't feel a little satisfaction. But mostly I felt relief. Relief that my kids were finding their own way, that I was finally free from the cycle of blame and resentment. One evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the sunset, I realized I was happy. Not the kind of happy that comes from having everything you want, but the kind that comes from knowing you survived. That you're still standing, even after everything you've lost. If you want to know how I found love again, how I learned to trust, to open my heart and to believe in second chances, keep watching. Because sometimes the best chapters come after the story you thought was over. You ever find yourself smiling at a stranger and realize you're finally ready to let someone new into your life? That's what happened to me one rainy afternoon at the grocery store. I was reaching for a loaf of bread when I bumped into a woman with kind eyes and a gentle laugh. Her name was Grace. She was a widow, a teacher, and she had a way of making even the most ordinary conversation feel like something special. We started talking, first about bread, then about books, then about life. Before I knew it, we were sharing coffee at a little cafe down the street. I told her about my divorce, about Karen, about the kids. She listened, really listened, without judgment or pity. She told me about losing her husband, about starting over, about the loneliness that sometimes crept in when the world got quiet. If you've ever tried to date again after a long marriage, you know how terrifying it can be. But you also know how exhilarating it is to feel seen, to feel wanted, to feel hope. What would you do if you had a second chance at love? Would you take the risk, or would you let fear hold you back? Let me know in the comments. And if you haven't seen our story about the man who found happiness after heartbreak, watch it next. Sometimes the best beginnings come after the hardest endings. Grace and I started seeing each other more often. We went to art shows, to concerts in the park, to quiet dinners where we talked about everything and nothing. She met Emily and Jake, and they liked her right away. Emily said, "She makes you smile, Dad. I haven't seen you smile like that in years." Jake just nodded, but I could tell he approved. Meanwhile, Karen's life was unraveling. She tried to sell the house, but the market was down. She called me, asking for advice, for help, for anything. I listened, but I didn't rescue her. I'd learned my lesson. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let someone face the consequences of their choices. One evening, Grace and I sat on my balcony, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. She took my hand and said, "You know, you're not the same man you were when we met. You're stronger, softer too. I like who you're becoming." I smiled, feeling a warmth I hadn't felt in years. "I like him too," I said. "I think I'll keep him around." If you've ever had to rebuild your life from the ground up, you know how hard it is to trust again. But you also know how every small act of courage, every smile, every conversation, every new beginning, is a victory. What would you say to your younger self if you could? Would you tell him to be brave, to take the leap, to believe in love again? Let me know in the comments. And if you haven't seen our story about the father who found peace after loss, watch it next. Sometimes the best revenge is living a life you're proud of. That night, as I drifted off to sleep, I realized I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living, and for the first time in a long time, I was excited to see what tomorrow would bring. You ever look around and realize your life is finally your own? That's how it felt as the months passed with Grace by my side. We built new routines, Sunday morning walks, movie nights, volunteering at the local food bank. I found myself laughing more, worrying less, and feeling grateful for the second chance I never thought I'd get. But just when I thought the past was behind me, Karen called again. This time her voice was different, tired, almost defeated. "I'm selling the house," she said. "I can't afford it anymore. I thought I'd be happier, but I'm not." There was a long pause. "I'm sorry for how things ended. I'm sorry for what I did to you." I listened, letting her words settle. For a moment, I felt the old anger rise up, but it faded just as quickly. "Thank you, Karen," I said quietly. "I hope you find what you're looking for." After we hung up, I sat in silence, thinking about everything we'd been through. I realized I didn't hate her. I didn't even resent her. I just felt free. Free from the need to prove myself, free from the weight of old wounds, free to love the people who loved me back. Emily and Jake noticed the change too. Emily started bringing her friends around, filling my apartment with laughter and stories. Jake asked if he could stay with me for a while, just to get a break from Mom's new place. I welcomed him with open arms, grateful for the chance to be the father he needed. Grace became part of our family, not by replacing anyone, but by adding something new. Kindness, patience, a sense of peace. She helped Emily with college applications, cheered Jake on at his games, and made me believe in happy endings. If you've ever had to forgive someone who hurt you, you know how hard it is to let go, but you also know how freeing it is to finally move on. What would you say to the person who broke your heart, if you had the chance? Would you forgive them, or would you hold on to the pain? Let me know in the comments. And if you haven't seen our story about the man who found joy after betrayal, watch it next. Sometime, the best closure is a new beginning. One evening, as we all sat around the dinner table, Grace, Emily, Jake, and me, I realized I was exactly where I was meant to be. The past was a chapter, not the whole story, and the future, it was wide open. That night, as I watched the city lights from my balcony, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. And for the first time, I was truly, deeply happy. You ever realize that the life you thought was over is actually just beginning? That's what I felt as the seasons changed and my world kept growing. Grace and I took a trip to the coast, just the two of us, walking along the beach with the wind in our hair and the sun on our faces. I watched her laugh, watched her dance barefoot in the surf, and I thought, this is what a happiness looks like. This is what I almost missed. Emily called one night, her voice bubbling with excitement. "Dad, I got into law school." I could hear the pride in her words, the hope for the future. Jake started talking about college, about maybe studying engineering, about wanting to make a difference. I realized that despite everything, my kids were thriving. They'd seen me fall, but they'd also seen me get back up. Maybe that was the best lesson I could ever give them. Karen, meanwhile, moved into a small condo across town. She called less often, but when she did, it was different. No more bitterness, no more blame, just two people who'd shared a life, now moving on in their own ways. She even invited Grace and me to Emily's graduation, and for the first time, it felt right. No tension, no old wounds, just pride in our daughter and gratitude for the journey. If you've ever found peace with someone you once thought you'd never forgive, you know how powerful that is. What would you say to your past if you could? Would you thank it for the lessons or wish it away? Let me know in the comments. And if you haven't seen our story about the father who found family after loss, watch it next. Sometimes the best revenge is building a life so good you wouldn't trade it for anything. One evening, as we all sat together, Grace, Emily, Jake, even Karen, I realized that family isn't about who stays or who leaves. It's about who shows up, who forgives, who keeps loving even when it's hard. I looked around the table and felt a deep, quiet joy. I'd lost a marriage, but I'd gained a life. That night, as Grace and I walked home under the stars, she squeezed my hand and said, "You know, you're not the man you were when we met. You're better, stronger, happier." I smiled, knowing she was right. I'd been through the fire and I'd come out the other side, changed, but not broken. If you've ever doubted that you could start over, let this be your sign. You can. You will. And sometimes what feels like the end is really just the beginning. You might think a story like this ends in a courtroom or with a signature on a page, but the truth is, real endings are quieter and more beautiful than that. In the months and years that followed, I found myself reflecting on everything I'd lost and everything I'd gained. The pain of betrayal, the sting of being laughed at by someone I once loved, the fear of starting over alone, but also the pride of watching my children grow, the peace of finding love again, and the deep, steady joy of building a life on my own terms. One afternoon, as I sat on the porch with Grace, watching the sun set over the city, I realized I was grateful for every twist and turn. "If you could go back, would you change anything?" she asked, her voice gentle. I thought about it for a long moment. "No," I said, "because every mistake, Every heartbreak, every hard lesson brought me here. And here is exactly where I want to be. Emily graduated law school with honors. Jake started his first engineering job. We celebrated together, me, Grace, the kids, even Karen. There was no bitterness, no old wounds reopened. Just a family, changed but still connected, still cheering each other on. Karen and I even shared a quiet moment, both of us older, wiser, and finally at peace. "We did all right, didn't we?" she said. I nodded. We did. If you've ever wondered whether you can survive heartbreak, whether you can rebuild after losing everything, let this be your answer. You can, you will, and sometimes what feels like the end is really just the start of something better. So, what would you do if you were laughed at in your darkest moment? Would you let it define you, or would you rise above it? Would you hold on to anger, or would you choose forgiveness and freedom? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might be the hope someone else needs. And if this story touched you, please subscribe, like, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Check out our other videos, especially the one about the man who found peace after losing everything at Thanksgiving. Because sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones we live through and the ones we choose to tell. Thank you for listening. Hold your loved ones close and remember, your worth isn't measured by what you lose, but by how you rise after the fall.